Welcome to Working Fans Presents. And I'm a little nervous for this episode today because this is something outside of our regular wheelhouse, but I am going to be interviewing Naomi from the Connecticut podcast. Now, I've had some technical difficulties, so we're not going to have a video of her up, but I'm going to put up the logo from her podcast because, frankly, yes, this is something you need to check out. But Naomi, thanks for joining us and give the people a little rundown of what your show is all about.
Sure. This is a podcast about the religious group that I grew up in, located in Norwich, Connecticut. And then there was a sister church, quote unquote, a sister church, a second church in Mansfield, Woodhouse in England, in the UK. And this church is basically weird. As hell.
Weird is an understatement.
I don't know. What would you call it? What are the descriptive words you would use? I guess unique, wild. I don't know. Captivating. I don't know.
Abusive.
Abusive. Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Yeah,
Cult
for
of
sure.
You use the term cult in the title, but there's definitely like a cult of personality. I've got a ton of questions about Gene because we got to start somewhere. There's a lot to talk about here.
Yes.
But
the story is basically about, well, the first season is basically talks about this person. There's a prophet. And what's weird about this particular cult, I think a lot of cults could be, have some similarities, but this particular cult is different because there's a female at the top from England. And so it's this British grandmother lady who kind of basically rules this congregation, all the different members, all of their lives. And she rules their lives with literally like mental torture and torment. She torments them mentally. So that's how she controls all of the members, is this grandma from England. And she's this prophet that hears directly from God. And she hears things like, hey, God is telling me I'm hearing this about you.
Yes. And before we get into the bulk of this interview, let me play a quick intro video and then we will jump into kind of what we plan to talk about here today.
Yeah.
Now, what makes this interview so different from most of the interviews we do is Naomi and I actually went to school together. And I discovered this podcast right around, I think, when we were starting ours, because I remember seeing that somebody I went to school with had a podcast. And I'm like, I have to check that out. And then the first thing I was jealous of was the audio quality. This thing sounds like NPR, and that is great. And then you get into the storytelling, which you feature each member's stories in an episode. And the storytelling is so captivating, but I think the pain almost trumps the storytelling. Like, would you agree? Or how do you feel the episodes come across?
It's very dark. It is nightmare fuel. Just especially working on the latest episode, Faith's episode in season 2. I had to listen to it to work on it, I had to listen to it like 20 times. And I'm telling you, I was having so many nightmares, and it's dark. It's dark stuff. It's not fun. It's like not a fun, happy, light project. It's definitely dark. It's definitely trigger warning for any trauma survivors or cult survivors, or honestly, any trauma survivors. But anybody. It's just like a lot of people have told me, like, I am not ready to listen to it yet, or I listened to it a little bit and had to like take breaks. It's okay to take frequent breaks. It's pretty dark stuff. It's just dark subject matter. but it's important. It's an important story.
It is like when I heard about it, I had no idea this group existed. So, like, I told a friend of mine about it, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that group from high school." And I'm like, "I don't remember a cult at all." How, like, we'll start with question one. High school is different for anyone. How did you make it through going through high school when you have to deal with all of this? Because they house themselves as like a religious group, but then it gets so much deeper than that. How do you make it through high school? Because like I feel like I barely made it through high school, and I feel well adjusted as opposed to like listening to this.
I know. Yeah. Well, I have a hard time. Like one of my trauma symptoms is memory loss. So that's one of the reasons why it's so crazy. I'd like to say a special shout out to our class, our graduating class of our high school, if you don't mind, because they've been so supportive. And these people, it's really hard for me. I feel a little insecure about this. I don't have a ton of memories from my childhood or from high school. I remember a few things here and there, but my brain just blocked it out because I was in survival mode so much. I was just so afraid to make the wrong move. To do anything right or wrong. Like I didn't know anything from this group could be perceived as a sin. And these sins were very intangible. Like it wasn't like I was actually doing something wrong. It was, you have pride in your heart. You're thinking a bad thought. You're bad. And so they could come and punish you and interrogate you and target you for any reason. So I had to really watch what I was doing at all times. But I'm so thankful for a few things, especially in high school and in middle school. I had, Mrs. Bush. I don't know if you remember her.
Yes.
From She was like my English teacher and my like drama teacher, and we did summer theater. And I'm really lucky that I had hobbies that kind of helped a little bit with, like, I loved music, I loved choir, so I was like in chamber choir, I was in choir, I was in the theater, I was in the plays, and I took piano and singing lessons from Mr. Churchill. And I swear, like, Mr. Churchill was kind of a miracle for me because I spent so much time under his, teaching in his classes, and he really, I don't know, like he demanded a lot from his students, but he wasn't mean about it. It's like you just wanted to do your best for him because you respected him and he was a great, leader, but he wasn't like the King's Chapel group where everyone was just like, threatening you that you're going to go to hell and you're going to, be, God is going to hate you and you're going to lose everything. So that having him as a teacher helped. And so shout out to Mr. Churchill. And then, so my hobbies helped. I was still in survival mode though. I was still in like constant fear and paranoia and things like that. I did have like an eating disorder during that time that nobody knows about. This is the first time I'm talking about it. And then I had a school friend that she had a really nice family. Do you remember Amber?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Amber and her family. I loved Amber and Danielle. They were twins, and they are twins. And I loved Amber, and she became kind of like a sister to me, a school friend that I was able to. I try to get over to her house as much as possible to spend as much time with her family as possible. And she had like a nice, normal, healthy, quote unquote family. So um, I was able to relax when I was over there in that environment. So I was lucky to have some of these little miracles that I had in my life to help me not completely lose, my mental health and everything. So that's how I got through it. And then I escaped when I was 18. And I escaped, and my family cut ties with me, and I had to start completely over. I didn't know anybody, and I went to Southern, and I was the only other person that went to Southern with me was Matt Case. And
Oh
we
wow.
both were in the theater program, but I actually ended up having to drop out of the theater program because I had to have like 3 jobs while I was in college. And so I wasn't able to be involved, and to do all the things that I wanted to do. So I ended up having to change my major and everything, and that really changed the course of my life. So then I ended up pursuing music, and I ended up moving to Nashville. And the whole time, from the time I got out up until now, or recently, until I started doing Colton, Connecticut, I really kept everything just stuffed down. I just kept, and when people would ask me about my family, my childhood, my upbringing, I always felt so uncomfortable because I've always felt different than anyone else I've met, because I have this like secret. It's like this dark secret that I'm not like sharing with people openly, because I really just being like, yeah, I had a religious upbringing, and just not really getting into it. And it really did set me up for all kinds of weird stuff in my life, to not really face the truth about what this thing was. And because just kind of living in denial or just stuffing it down or whatever, it wasn't helping me face some of these trauma symptoms that I was experiencing, like depression, anxiety, just all kinds of things. I wasn't understanding why I was going through all of these things. And because I wasn't facing what was really, really the truth of my childhood, of this thing that I was a part of, this thing that I was born into and grew up in. So when I got pregnant, when I had both of my children, both of the pregnancies of my children, that was when I really had this perspective. It's almost kind of like I became like this mama bear, and I realized that what happened to this little innocent baby, which was me, was not okay. And it was not healthy, and it was not okay, and I was innocent, and it shouldn't have happened to these children. And not just the children, the adults too, but just talking about my own my own healing. I just, like, as I gave birth to these little innocent babies, and they're so innocent and full of life and exuberant, and I'm realizing that I was really, really oppressed. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because and I'm so thankful that a lot of people have been reaching out to me since my podcast has aired. And a lot of people from high school, a lot of people from our community, and a lot of people say they didn't have any idea how bad this was. They just thought it was like a religious church, but they really flew under the radar. They really operated under the radar. And people just thought that they were just religious and just a normal, like, kind of extra religious church. But really, there was some really heinous things going on behind the scenes. And I truly believe I have not gotten to the bottom of it. I really, really know in my gut, I believe I haven't gotten to the bottom of the abuse that happened within this church. And it kind of is like driving me a little batty, because these people don't really seem to want to talk about it, and they don't seem to want to share, and they don't want to come forward and talk about it. And I'm having a hard time really kind of understanding why. But back to what I was going to say was that some of the people that have come just reached out to me and connected with me from high school. They're like, I remember you as this and this and this. So I wanted to ask you, how do you remember me at all? And like, how do you remember me? Because I think it's so interesting, because I don't actually have a ton of memories from high school and childhood. So do you remember me?
Because I went to, I believe it was one birthday at Amber and Danielle's house, and I remember you there, because when you bring them up, I'm like, oh, I do remember you going to a party there. And were you part of the audio video club as well, or did you just do some
Yes.
things?
Yes, I did. I was.
See, I don't remember a ton about you, because I remember you as being quiet, like to yourself, but I remember you being a part of that AV club and looking at that and being like, "Oh, that's so cool." Like, I think I was a little too much more of a troublemaker than to get into that. Like, I had a radio and TV class that I loved, but like I remember looking up to that and being like, "Oh, that's so cool she can do that." And yeah, I remember you as being really quiet, and I think it might be a symptom of kind of what the group did, like having you guys keep so to yourselves that, I mean, you talk at one point about not being able to really make friends unless you could get them into the group or bring them in. That actually, I think that was in somebody else's episode, but how did you make
Yeah.
friends outside of the group? Like, that almost seems like a Herculean task to pull off.
Yeah, it was really, really difficult to, it was a common theme that it was a common thing. So even if it was in someone else's episode, it was my story as well that I can definitely relate to that. And I'm sure a lot, probably all of the children in the group could relate to that. That we were taught and trained that everyone else aside from us did not know the truth, that we are the light on the hill. We are the only church that is the right church. Like any other church in the community, any other Christian is not right with God. We're the only ones that have the true, and I'm sure that that's very common with a cult. But what's weird is that they wouldn't allow us to really have school friends. If we had school friends from school, then we had to really make sure that our heart was in the right place, that we're always constantly trying to bring them into the fold, that we're constantly trying to see if they have a relationship with Jesus, quote unquote, and to make sure that, you know, it's that we're friends with them for the right reasons, and that we're always trying to bring them to church. And I feel really bad about this. I talk to Amber about this all the time, but I did try to bring her to church because that was what I was trained to do. And she did come for just a little bit.
Mm.
And I'm thankful that she didn't get sucked into it, because I would have that guilt of, I can't believe I actually sucked someone into this. I'm really thankful I don't have that guilt. But
You guys were trained as kids to do that. So, like, I don't think you can necessarily hold that against yourself. I mean, thank
yeah,
God you didn't pull a friend in, but I mean, I wouldn't beat yourself up too much over it, because a lot of what this group was telling you, they were teaching you what they wanted you to know. And it seems like a lot of the other details are left out. Like, we're not going to get into specific episodes on this because we want you to listen. I'm trying to like re get to know somebody I went to high school with and see what they went through, because the pain that you outline in these episodes, it's different for each person, but there are some things that are very similar.
mhm. Well, I wanted to just go back really quick to tell you, this is really crazy that you said that I was basically like quiet and reserved and like to myself. So someone said that to me recently from our high school. Someone said to me, "What I remember about you, this is how I could describe you, is you were kind of closed off, distant, shy, to yourself, quiet, reserved." Like when I told my husband this, he was like, "What?" I mean, if I told any of my girlfriends, anybody that's close to me, that this is the list that somebody described me as, like that just shows me, and it's really sad actually. It shows me, and it's interesting. It shows me the oppression that I really was under and the survival mode that I was in, that I was too afraid to be myself, because my personality in real life is so like I wanted to be a theater major and I wanted to be on Broadway. I'm very like over the top, kind of flamboyant and dramatic and loud, and that's just who I am. That's my personality. And one of the themes of this group was they wanted to make sure that the children, and really anybody, adults too, were never exuberant and not like just full of life and joyful and themselves, and really confident, and had strong personalities. Like they wanted, when I say they, I don't really know who the they is, but they, whatever the powers that be, wanted us to be broken down, and they use the cruelest of cruelest tactics. But if they saw us being a little too happy, if we gave a little too much of a happy joyful answer of any sort of question, if we showed a little bit too much interest in our hobbies, like I had to keep all of my interest of my hobbies on the down low. Like I couldn't be like, I'm so excited about being in this play. Like I love it. I have such this passion. Like our passions and our desires, I'll just speak for myself, my passions, my desires, my longings, my dreams, my wishes, my thoughts and my feelings, like just everything, my personality, just everything was just like automatically a sin to this group. Just from childhood all the way up, it was a sin. It was Satan. And I was just taught to doubt myself, like not listen to myself, that all of my thoughts and feelings and all those kind of things are just automatically sin, 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 bad, bad, bad. You are bad, bad, bad. If you want that, then you're bad. You don't have a servant's heart. If you want to choose your own career path and you want to choose something for yourself, then you're obviously not following God's will. You obviously don't care about God's will. You obviously have pride in your life. You obviously have sin in your life. It just is like they broke down any of our good stuff, our good nature. And so that is the common theme there. That
And it's
definitely was my
crazy that it
experience.
happens during a time when your personality's developing. You're starting to realize who you are during those years and you're trying to get comfortable with it. And you were robbed of that opportunity. And I think a lot of those kids were robbed of this opportunity.
Definitely 100%. And, just being a parent now and having children and seeing the different stages of, and, obviously I'm not a parenting expert or a psychologist or anything, but just, from my experience in this group and then being a parent and seeing my children and their, natural innocence and, like my little boy is jumping all around and he wants to be Spider-Man. And like my daughter, she's 11, so she's like a preteen, so she has a little bit of like an attitude, she's sassy, and all of these things are probably very natural and just come with their different stages of development. And I just know that I see how I was this child that was totally just demonized, and just it wasn't just me, it was all of us. And just taught that we basically were just so bad for just showing any. I mean, I this is part of this story, is that I spent so much time in church. It was like 6 days a week, at least 6 days a week, after school and everything. And we had to sit there and just be so quiet and just not make a peep, and not, you can't make the wrong facial expression, you can't sit in the wrong chair. I mean, it's just so controlling and limited. And just, yeah, I think it really did squelch our or my childhood development. And I don't even know in what ways, because I'm not an expert and I'm still trying to kind of like sort this all out, because it's really intricate. Like there's just a real intricate web that I can see that is of my mind. I feel like a little bit of a Frankenstein from this group. So that is kind of where I am right now in my healing journey or healing process. Is I really want to unravel these things and to take a look at like each individual topic and try to work through it. And I feel like, it's good for probably a lot of people, hopefully, that can relate to this experience in some way. So that's kind of my next project, is that I'm working on. I'm working on a book or a book series about, different things, just exploring and just being curious about my own issues, my own challenges from growing up in this environment. And so I'm working on a new podcast where I want to have like cult experts and child psychologists and, all kinds of people, kind of professionals, to help me. And I think that helping me in like a public way is going to hopefully help other people as well, that maybe aren't brave enough to go get help, or not brave enough to say, this is something that I was a part of, and it is affecting me. It's affecting my life. Because I'm telling you that this group and everything that happened and growing up in this has affected my life every single day. There's no quick fix and there's no moving on for me. Like this is now like what my life is all about, and it is like the passion of my life now, because it affects every part of my life. It affects how I communicate with people, how I see myself, how I see other people, how I parent, how I respond to different situations, different circumstances, like challenges, relationships, like what kind of, man that I fall in love with, it just affects so many things. Like the list goes on and on and on. It literally never ends. So I've had a lot of healing and growth, thankfully, through all of this like healing work I've done, especially because of this podcast. But there's so much more, and it's like I said, it's so heavy duty and it's so intricate. So that's kind of where I'm
You've talked
focusing
about
next. Sorry,
got you. Now
go
you've
ahead.
talked about a lot of people from high school reaching out to you. I think it's because like when we were all in high school, I think nobody feels secure. Like, I mean, I remember I didn't particularly like school. I was also more like on the acting up side. So I always just felt like an issue. And I think that's how a lot of high schoolers are. But then you've got that added little bit on it. Now, what does it felt like to have so many people reach out and, give you that outpouring? Cause like I didn't know about it. So when I hear about this, it makes me flash back in my mind to high school. And I'm like, how do you go through high school and how do you become a productive adult after going through all that in your formative years? And were you nervous for people that you grew up with to hear your story?
I was so nervous to do this podcast, season one. I like before I did it, I was like, I was so terrified, but I knew I had to do it for me. It's like it was like I was on fire. Like I like had this fire lit and like this light bulb turn on, and I just knew I had to do it for me. And I just didn't care what, at the end of the day, I was like, I don't care what anybody says or how anybody feels about it. I have to do it for me. And what's weird is I had to do it for me in a public way. It wasn't just like, oh, I have to just write in my journal what happened. Like I have to, because I stuffed it down in such a huge way for so long. This story of this group, it's like I don't want us to all die and this story of this group to be just swept under the rug and no one to tell the truth and no one to say what really happened. And the truth is I still don't feel like I've gotten to the bottom of the truth because I still feel like there's more. But, I was terrified about releasing it and there were so many emotions that went into it. But I did get an outpouring of support from anyone and everyone you can imagine. And I've not had any like backlash or any negative anything, which it's been kind of a miracle for me because um, I a lot of the people of the group have just given me positive feedback. Like it helps start conversations within the group of them realizing like this was a cult.
And that's what's
You know.
important, I think, is for everybody to start, this discourse because
Hmm.
I'm sure there's people that feel like they did nothing wrong that might discover, hopefully would discover the on.
Yeah, I think it would be great for people to continue to have the hard conversations. This is not easy stuff. We have to first of all accept that. It's not easy, it's not fun stuff, but we have to have these difficult conversations so that we can help each other kind of like unlock this box so that this is my personal opinion so that we can like help unlock each other and help heal. And so and then the outpouring of the contact and the like reaching out to me and connecting with me from high school is like it's so wonderful because i I've never felt like I really was a part of that group or part of the community and part of the high school like everybody else because and I'm so thank you for saying that you also you feel like everyone secure and uncomfortable because I don't know if I'm going to remember everyone, and that's scary to me. But also, I don't know what they remember of me. I don't know what I remember of myself. I don't know if they're going to, walk up to me and be like, "You're a witch." I don't have any clue. So it's just like those scary like things that I have thought of. But, that's all probably that programming of something bad's going to happen to you. I have that programming because that's really what was like kind of programmed into me, is like something bad is going to happen to you at all times. Um, that feeling of unsafe, being unsafe. But the people that have reached out to me, it feels so great. I can't even tell you. It really means the world to me. So thank you very, very much to everybody from the community and from the high school and from our high school and from our school. I've had nothing but support and people rooting for me, and it's just beautiful. I didn't even imagine that would happen.
I know, even this interview, I feel like it's at least a year or two in the making. It had to be at the right time, and it's glad that it came at this time, because early on, I mean, I just created a podcast for a place to talk pro wrestling, to get out my awful jokes, and like that's where it started. But now that it's gone on, and especially like getting inspiration from your podcast, seeing that like real stories could be told. And that's why I created this Working Fans Presents, to have a place to feature other things that aren't that. And this podcast has always, you've always been on my radar, because just the school thing. And one thing it's kind of been weird about this interview, but it's such like a call from people that really have like know little of each other. So I like that reconnecting and, building these bonds that, you know, weren't there. So I got to ask about this group. We've talked so much about you in your past. This group, and I mean, you should I don't mean that in a dismissive way, because anybody that tells their story, it needs to be featured. But listening to all these episodes, I've got questions about this group. So, are they still around in any form?
So it's a little complicated of a question and an answer, but I want to tell you what I know. So I left in, let's see, the year 2002, I believe. I left when I was 18. The minute I was 18, I applied to college behind my parents' back and got the hell out of there. So people obviously stayed for whoever knows how long, and then the I'm still kind of exploring and digging into the story here of what's going on, what is happening now, what happened, because the church in England did implode. The church in England supposedly, which I really pray to God that nothing is still going on in England, but I don't know what ever happened to these characters. There's characters in England that we haven't even explored yet on my podcast. But Cyril is dead. The prophet is dead. The church did continue. And from what I'm hearing and gathering is that the church continued in the same way, like still the interrogations of like a really weird, gross, like perverted sexual nature. Because that's like a big part of this story. That there were just like perverts everywhere, like just like all over the place. And I don't really know. I don't know. It just feels like a very like I don't know how to really dig into this, but like it's just kind of like where was that all coming from? I really don't understand that part still, and I still want to get to the bottom of that. But anyway, so the church in England did implode because they, I guess, created some sort of play, this massive play that they were going to create this huge production, and I guess the finances fell apart, and it just kind of imploded. And then the church in Connecticut supposedly closed, and then now there is a church that is called Castle Church in Connecticut, in Norwich, and that is run by Adam Bowles. Do you know who Adam Bowles is?
The name doesn't sound familiar, but I'm sure I'm familiar with him if he's from the area.
He did go to our high school. Him and Sarah Bowles, Adam Bowles and Sarah Bowles, they're brother and sister. They did go to our high school, but they're a few years older than us. And so he's the pastor of the church. And then, Faith Werberly's family, like her sister, Louisa Bowles, that is Adam Bowles' wife. And so then her brother, Jono Bowles, or Jono Wibberley, he is in the church and his wife is in the ministry. So, I mean, it's kind of like, to me, I'm like, this is the same family. But from what I'm hearing, it from different members, okay, they're saying that this is completely different. It's a 180. There's no judgment. There's no interrogations. It's nothing like that. It's no pressure. It's just like a normal, regular Christian church. So like, I can't be the one to make that judgment call. You know, I've come to terms with that. Like, I don't go to the church, you know, I'm never going to go to the church. I can't be the one to make the judgment call. If y'all want to go to the church, good luck with that. But there are sermons online. And I guess I'm giving in promoting Castle Church because I'm telling you, you can go to their website and you can watch their sermons online and just judge for yourself. Like, you can make your own judgment calls, you know, but I've talked to a number of people that go to Castle Church and they've all told me, like, the moment I feel uncomfortable, I'm out. So supposedly they don't feel uncomfortable. They do feel free. You know, my biggest thing is, like, I want people to be able to think for themselves, and I want people to be able to feel comfortable and safe and free and be able to think for themselves. And, you know, so that's my main thing. So, you know, I can't answer that question of, like, if it's a safe environment or not, you know, but I have always liked Adam. I, like, personally, just, you know, of course, I always loved John Hibbert. I always loved, you know, certain individuals in King's Chapel because, like, I never had experiences with them. Like, because you have to understand that each of the ministers were kind of like designated to each, you know, to the different families. So, like, John Monahan was kind of like the dude that oversaw my particular family. Like, all these leaders had different families underneath their little umbrella. And I didn't have, like, John Hibbert was in England. I never saw him. When I was a little girl, I just, like, adored him. And, you know, now finding out about all this different abuse with all these different leaders, it's like, oh my God. So, but with Adam, I mean, I've only ever had positive, awesome experiences with Adam. He's always been supportive of me, like, forever. And he's always been nice to me. So I don't want to tell you, like, go to Castle Church or don't go to Castle Church. Like, I just don't feel like that's my judgment call. But, you know, supposedly it's not an offshoot, but it's the same, like, kind of people. So I don't
yeah, it's kind of derivative, but it might not be like the spiritual success. I've got to ask about a lot of these characters because
please do.
I got to ask at what age you stopped believing, because there was one thing that was said about Cyro that I'm not even going to call her Cyro. I got to call her Jean, because as an adult, I've tried not to call people by nicknames. And if my prophet has a nickname, I got to have questions. But then she also liked watching Jerry Springer. So is that something you found out later? And at what age did you stop believing in the group? Because, like, I started looking at Jean a lot more skeptically while listening to these episodes. One, when hearing that she was banging her head against the radiator when hearing voices, which I don't know if that's necessarily how religious prophets start. But then what prophet finds entertainment in Jerry Springer? And I realized this was early 2000s when Springer was popping off, but it's also like, how do you get entertained by that? It's sick.
Yeah, that is the word, sick. Like, I think I can't, like, it just, all of this kind of still, like, boggles my mind. So let me just explain something to you really quick before I even go, like, there's two parts to your answer, or two parts to your question. So one part of one part of the answer is, I stuffed this stuff down after I left the group, and I was just in survival mode, trying to survive, trying to build a life for my own self. And I also was, like, being gaslit by certain individuals that were just like, no, it's a nice church, you should come back. So I it got to a point where, after so many years, I didn't even know if this was real or not. Like, I would have nightmares. I would have flashbacks. I mean, I'm talking, this was real trauma. So I would have real flashbacks, real nightmares. I mean, real dark depression. And I would have no clue if this stuff in my subconscious was real or not, because no one was validating it for me. That was one of the reasons why I created Cult in Connecticut, is because I needed someone to validate this stuff. So once I started talking to these people that were willing, there was only a few people that were willing to be contributors, to be on my podcast and tell their story. It really helped me because I thought I was the only person that went to England, that was the only teen. I didn't even, first of all, I didn't even know if I actually went to England or not. Like, it got to a point where I was like gaslighting myself, if that's even a thing, to where like I would have all these dreams about Cyro. And I'm sorry, I do call her Cyro, but most people are like, I will not call her that. Her name is Jean Spademan. But I just think she's like this evil character, and that's her evil, like, character name. So but
I like the thought of that, like an alter ego. Like,
yeah, like, I mean, she's like, Venom. She's like a what is it called? Like a not a super, it's a super villain.
yeah, she's kind of like if you melded, like, this might be hyperbole, but I would say like if you put Venom and Hitler together, and like, because like just the level of control. And then this dude John, I got to get to him next because he's helping convey her message. Yet on the newest episode, you said two of the things he wanted to be were an actor and something else.
I think it was actor. I think it was just
and it's
actor.
like, what kind of, I can see as a preacher wanting to get some theatrics down, but like, to me, you're doing that for godly purposes. So why do you want to be an actor? And it's those little details. Sorry to off rail your answer, but those little details about John and Jean that I'm like, ooh, these people were in collusion to do something big, and I don't know what it is. It's not good.
It's not good. That's for sure. We all know that. Well, at least we can all agree on that. So when I started getting all of these stories, I was in my, this is kind of embarrassing, but I was in my closet, like recording these interviews and listening to these stories. And I'm like in fetal position in my closet, like on the floor, like kind of crying, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm finally being validated. Like, my subconscious, these memories and these nightmares and these flashbacks are real. This is a real thing. Like, it's kind of shocking. Sometimes I still wake up in the morning while I'm bringing my kids to school. I'm like, I can't believe this is my life, and this really did happen. Like, this is so crazy and so bogus sometimes. But especially when I find out new information, I'm like, what? I still find out more information that's just like, what? Especially when someone was describing Cyro and saying that she loved the weird, what are they called? Those magazines, like National Enquirer, the tabloids.
Oh, tabloids.
Yeah, she loves she loved the tabloids. She loved Jerry Springer. And just certain things I have found out about her, about how like sexual and perverted she was. And it's like kind of shocking. But I wanted to tell you, the second part of your question is, when was I like, okay, my eyes are open, this is like not good. Was when I was basically in England. I was like, all of this is made up, because like I did know from as a little girl, looking back, I can see that I was very, very, very uncomfortable and feeling unsafe the majority of the time. Like, my stomach was always in knots. Like, I've always had like digestive issues, and like my stomach's always hurt, and like all that stuff when I was a little girl onward, because I was always stressed out, because I was like under so much pressure of just needing to be perfect and just being like scared out of my mind. And but so I always knew when I was growing up, like, there was something inside of me as like an innocent child that was saying like, this isn't love. Like, this isn't, especially like comparing it to like people that are nice and sweet and like, I wasn't taught to like listen to my feelings and listen to like, hey, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. I was actually taught that like feeling good was actually a sin. So, I was really confused my whole life. But what really took the cake for me, and what really helped me crack open this, was the story of what happened to me when I was in England. I was basically, and I won't tell you the whole story, but basically like tricked into this trip. Like, as a teenager, I was tricked into this trip to go to England. And I remember Nate Pepin saying to
Yep.
me, I'm never going to see you again. I remember I was in the hallway right in front of the theater. I was in the hallway, and I remember Solon was pissed too. He was like, yeah, Solon was pissed too. He threw a Bible at me. He's like, for this. He said something like, for this. And he like threw it at me. And I was like, whoa, what's his problem? And then Nate was like, I'm never going to see you again.
Nate would be the one to say that too.
And I was just like, what is wrong with these dudes? What's up with these dudes? But now I know what was up with those dudes. Because what's so strange is listening to one of the contributors say like that their child went to England. And went through these interrogations, and this other child went to England and went through these interrogations. Like basically you got sent there to be brainwashed and to be mentally tortured and tormented. That's why you got sent there. I truly, like, I don't know if it was a conscious thing. Like this is one of the things about my story in my life that I don't understand if it was all done on purpose or not, because my parents ended up getting divorced while I was in England. Like, which is so weird. Like,
Yeah,
why did my mom was in England and she divorced my dad while he was in Connecticut. Like she decided to separate from him. And then like I came back and I never saw my house again. I never saw my stuff. I never saw my cat, my childhood home. I had to, not be able to talk to my father anymore. Like all of this stuff happened while I was in England. And I knew that what they were saying about me was lies. And I had to admit to these things that were not true. And they were, of course, all intangible stuff. You think you know everything. You think you're better than everyone. You have pride, like all of this stuff. And I was just like, no. It was the first time that I was like, I'm not going to give them the answer that they want. And I am going to stand strong. And then things got worse and worse and worse for me over there. And they were just trying to break me down. And then I really actually like black out at that point where I don't really remember like the ins and outs of what I did there. Like I don't remember I don't remember what I did, like where I was a zombie over there. Like I don't know what even happened to me over there. I don't know. I have no memories. I blacked out. Won't probably ever remember. All I remember is that like on Christmas, I was sitting there or at around Christmas time right before we came home from England, like my mom sat me and my little brother down, just a child. He was like 6 years old or something. He was like tiny. I don't know. How old was he? No. I'm sorry. He was 10. I was 16. He was 10. And she said, we're not going back home to our home. Like, we're going to go live with a different family from the church, which was the McFalls. Do you remember Heather McFall?
Yes.
We went to their house. And I never saw my house again. Like it just was done in like a very, very, very dramatic, weird way. And that's when I was just like, I'm done. I have to plan my escape. And I tried to escape several times. I tried to run away. I had some friends that were school friends that tried to help me. And my mom scared them. Like there were a few people that scared these people, my friends. And they were like, I'm sorry, I can't help you because I'm scared.
Yeah, it seems like with this group, it's a lot of like adults imposing their will on children, because listening to these episodes, what really gets me is the amount of adults that are willing to accuse kids of sexual things. And in this day and age, I almost can't believe that it would fly. Like when Faith was saying the things that she didn't even know what she was being accused about, but she was being introduced to all these things. It just felt so. That's where the word sick came from, because I'm like, Jean should, if she is any kind of prophet or leader, she should have known better than to talk to children about this. Like that just seems like that crossed the line.
Yeah, there were so many inappropriate things that were being exposed to children. Children were being exposed to so many inappropriate things that are not okay. And to me, I don't really know, because I don't like, I'm just this like survivor from this church. I really don't know what I'm saying. I don't know if there's any, like, all I'm doing is kind of following my gut, but I think it has to be some sort of form of sexual abuse. because you were the children, like when I was a child, I was by John Monahan. John Monahan put me in a car, in the back seat of his car, drove me around and told me that I had lust in my heart, and I didn't know what it meant, and I had to admit to it. Like, you don't have a choice. I didn't have a choice to say no, I don't know what that is, or I don't, what is that, or no, like, you don't, like, you just don't have that option in this particular situation. And it got way worse for other people than what happened to me. Obviously, like with Faith's situation is just like heinous, 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 and cruel. And it just, like, it's got to be a form of sexual abuse. It's got to be, like, in my opinion, but I don't know. Like, I don't know anything about the law or, anything like that. But, you know, it was more than that. Like, when we were adolescents, as adolescent children, and preteens and teenagers, we were targeted for having sexual feelings and sexual thoughts, and, like people were being interrogated, like, you want to masturbate, you want to watch porn, you want to do this,
And you're
you
like,
are.
yeah, we're 17. Like, what else do you think life is?
But they,
That's a
like,
terrible joke that I inserted, but it's
yeah,
them.
it's like this natural thing that happens to every human. It's like they turned it and used it against you to really shame you, to really control you. And I just want to understand, like, why did you pick that? Is it because you were perverted, or is it because that the easiest way to control somebody, to, like, make them feel shame in, like, the sexual area, like in that topic? Or, like, why? Why did you, like, do that to the children? Or, like, why did you do that to each other? It was to each other too. Like, when they got to be adults, it was like, you want to have an affair with this person's wife, and you want to have an affair with that person's wife, and you're thinking sexual thoughts about this person. And
That's
it's
what I
like,
couldn't understand. Like, when people are getting divorced and the two sets each other, and then, hey, I'm gonna move you out of this apartment, and this other person's gonna move in. Like, you have to listen to these episodes to believe these stories, but just that kind of thing, I'm like, wow, everybody was getting worked in this situation.
yes, yes. I mean, everybody, even probably the leaders, were going through their own interrogations of each other, and, like, not saying that they're, like, innocent, but you know, I'm sure every single person went through it, like, went through this mind control and this, like, weirdness,
I
you
mean,
know.
Jean's getting interrogated by the voices in her own head, so I can't imagine how it's
Yeah, I
going
know.
for
Who
other
was
people.
interrogating Cyro? I guess nobody was interrogating Cyro, and I bet nobody was really. I don't know if maybe anybody was interrogating John Hibbert. I mean, maybe Cyro. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think. I don't know if that ever happened. I
Now,
don't
John
know.
Hibbert, is that guy still alive? That is, if Gene isn't like the number one villain in this, that guy has to pull a close number two, like helping facilitate all this.
Yeah, and I kind of just want to know what the heck. Like, what is he, like? Just, like, is he mentally ill? Like, is he, like, just believe this stuff, or is he like like, is he like an evil doer? Like, what is up with him? Like, what, I don't understand. Like, it still, like, really boggles my mind. And but yeah, he is still alive. He's still writing his books. He has books. If any of you guys, I guess I'm promoting John Hibbert. Um, he does have books. He has some gobbledygook out there. If any of y'all want to read it, he is, I guess, on Facebook. And he actually, I saw a poem, a Christmas poem that he wrote um before Christmas, and it kind of made me giggle a little bit. And he writes poetry, he writes books, he's like an author or something, I don't know. But yeah, he's still alive, he's still kicking, he's still doing his thing, he's still writing about the Lord Jesus Christ.
That in itself is wild. Like, just I've got to say it again. You have to listen to these episodes because we're getting to know Naomi today and getting for her to tell a little more of her truth. But in each of these episodes, each guest gets to tell their own truth. And I want to keep into this show. You have to, especially like I still live in Jewett City. So my number one thing is what cult comes to Jewett City and is like, this is the place. Like,
Jewel
do they just
City.
see us and they're like, oh, these people can easily be manipulated? Or did they just find such kind people that, like, at what point did this whole thing turn the tide? Because they couldn't have started out as a cult. Like, when did it go from big religious family to something deeper? Or is that a question you haven't even discovered yet?
I guess when John Hibbert and Cyro and that whole ministry team from England came over to evangelize and find a church over here in the United States to work with. I guess I don't know where they went, like all the different areas that they went, but they found this one group that was willing to work with them. And it was this group in Jewett City. And I think it's where, like, downtown Jewett City, I think it's where the subway is now. I think, is there a subway there still? I don't know. But I think
it used to be a Subway. It's been a Mexican food mart. It's an empty place now. It's right next to what's kind of like a legal weed shop, but it's right across the street from the Sicko in Main Street, Jewett City, if you are familiar.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I know it's so sad because that town is so cute. And I was just talking about this today on my Instagram that, like, the town that I grew up in, the borough of Griswold that I grew up in was Hopeville. And I can't believe that's the name of it. It just kind of occurred to me today. It was called Hopeville. It was just so crazy. But Jewett City was like a little cute little town. And I guess, I don't know what happened, but Cyro had a vision or something from the Lord that said, it's not Jewett City, it's Jewel City. And it is a light on the hill for the rest of the world. So this community, yeah, I'll let you laugh.
We're not even a light on the hill for the surrounding towns. I love that she had such high hopes for us.
Hopeful. Hey, she had hope for Hopeful. So yeah, I mean, she wanted everyone to live within walking distance in Jewett City, and most of the families did live. Did you know this? That most of the families lived within walking distance in Jewett City.
Yeah, I
from
believe
each
you
other.
said it in one of the episodes because there was somebody that was like one of the only families that had to drive in, and they were almost like pressured to live in the city.
It was us. It was my family.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, and I'm sure it wasn't just my family. I'm sure there were lots of other families that, like, if you live in Lisbon or if you live in, that area, then you are not right with God, because God has this vision and he wants us to all be, the light on the hill together, like kind of like take over this little town and, for Jesus. So it is really interesting that this community, they flew under the radar, and the leaders had businesses in this area, and the people of this area, this community, like, really didn't understand what was really going on for the most part. They just thought, oh, it's like a really extra religious Christian church. They didn't really know like the level of abuse and that was taking place. And actually, people inside the group didn't even know about the level of abuse that was taking place in different ways. So, like, because some people, they didn't have a horrible experience. Like, some people just, were kind of left alone for whatever reason. But
so these interrogations weren't known throughout the group. It wasn't talked about.
It was definitely known. I mean, there is not one person that didn't know about the interrogations. That right there, that is something that there's no way I would believe that there's not a person that didn't know about the interrogations. We all either knew somebody, or we were the target and going through them ourselves, or we knew of someone else being accused of something, and it's like, you need to treat them, you need to, like, not talk to these people and treat them like shit, because they are this sinner that is not right with Jesus, because they're, they are doing this X, 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 Y, and Z. So we definitely knew, there was definitely an understanding there of, we have to treat this person not good because they're not as right with Jesus as this other person. There definitely was this level of what would you call it, hierarchy, or like people call it a totem pole. Like
Yeah,
there definitely was something there.
whatever it is, it's not religious, because you would think if you were like purely behind God and you saw that your brother wasn't where you thought they should be, your goal, I would think, as a godly person would be to bring them up, to kind of reach out to them, not to seal them off. But I mean, it shows you kind of what this group was about and how they went about their business.
Absolutely, because when I decided like I'm going to college, my family cut ties. My mother cut ties with me, and then like people that like would wanted to leave the church, it's like they're excommunicated, or people that wanted to do this or that, they were just shunned. So definitely, the way that they approached things just was, there was no like real like kindness, or like, what I mean. So yeah, that's how they thought that they were going to win someone back, is by like pushing them away, and just like and like they thought that those people would come back and grovel or something, and that's the only way that they really knew how to do relationships, like
I guess if
and
someone's beaten
communicate with.
enough, they could come back. Well, they would drag themselves back.
you know uh, Somebody at the top created this environment that this is the way we communicate with each other, and this is the way that we do things, and this is the way that we communicate with the outside world. But what I was talking about before is the community not really knowing what was going on, and there were businesses like Sam Ruberly Tire, and Kevin Hamill had a construction business, Hamill Construction, I believe it was called. um, there were businesses that were legit businesses in this community, that I think it would be really interesting too, for the people in this, more people in this community that had more interactions with these businesses, to really, not just the businesses, but just these people, to just hear more from the community, like from Norwich, people in Jewett City. You know, it's interesting to hear from them, and to hear, because like I said, a lot of it flew under the radar.
Yeah, there's a lot
And
of interesting work situations that I'm sure the federal government would have been happy to catch up with them on. Like, just the amount, I don't want to ruin too much from the podcast, but the amount
yeah,
that people were working for free or working well under their worth was alarming to me, because as an adult, I'm like, I even if if I'm friends with you, yes, I'll help out. But then at some point, it's like you almost got to pay somebody if they're doing 60, 70 hours at your business.
right. Yeah, and then there's also this whole element of these people from Honduras, that they would come in, and probably I'm still kind of getting to the bottom of it, but there were people from Honduras that would be kind of like shipped over to work, um, for free.
Wow.
So, I mean, I'm like, is this like a kind of like slavery situation? I mean, like
I
what
mean,
is going on here? You know?
when you talked about people cleaning up in other people's houses and like people going over to England just to do work, I'm like, ooh, that sounds like some kind of indentured servitude, borderline slavery thing going on there.
It kind of feels like that to me. And I don't know. I'm still like looking into it, but something's not right. Like, something's not right with the whole Honduras thing. They have multiple charities. I still haven't even dug into that. Like, there's more to be, and I think that the whole obsession with this sexual, thing, is, there's got to be more to that. There's got to be more to that. I think these people, there's got to be like that. Like, I can't help but think that there were sexual predators in this group. I just can't help but think that, and I know that that's like, I'm not accusing any one particular person, but it's just like this gut feeling, like I felt like there was more to this before, and I was right, and I'm feeling it again. So
Yes, and that's why we're going to be excited to see where this podcast goes. Now, I'm going to kind of end on a 3-part question because you've been so gracious with your time and we haven't even covered everything I'd hoped to talk about. So, when your book is closer to coming out or your new podcast, I would love to have you back on. But the question are, how, after this whole experience, where are you with God? Kind of how do you come to that point? And what do you have coming up and what would you like to promote?
So I'm working on I'm still working on new episodes of Cult in Connecticut, and I don't know where that will lead because I don't know who is willing to talk to me and to tell me some truths. And, who wants to help me get to the bottom of this? Sometimes it just really feels like people really don't want to like uncover anymore. So I really don't know what the future holds for Cult in Connecticut. So I can't answer that question. I'm working on a new podcast to kind of explore the psychological aftermath of this type of trauma and what I've gone through, my own trauma and my own, stuff that I've gone through. And a book about that. But where I am with God, quote unquote, I am not a Christian. That's for sure. I know that. I am just kind of more, into exploring what I want to, kind of being curious about life. I want to know who I am. I want to explore, um, I guess, like my gut instincts and my gut feelings, and kind of get more connected back to myself, like my inner child, I guess, or whatever you would want to call it. And I think that is spirituality to me, So I've been really trying to focus on self care. And to me, I feel like that in itself has really brought a lot of spirituality into my life. Like, just slowing things down and just meditating and, taking some deep breaths and learning how to really, heal mentally and emotionally has kind of opened up this like spiritual dimension for me, to where I do feel more connected to to a higher power, but I wouldn't probably call it Jesus, and I probably wouldn't call it, I don't know, like there were moments where I wasn't really comfortable with calling some moments I am actually comfortable with calling it Jesus. Sometimes I still say like, thank you, Jesus. Um,
Yeah.
but that's just kind of out of habit. But what I'm really saying is like, those moments of gratitude or those moments of love, like with my children and everything, I do feel like a lot of moments of gratitude where I do say like, thank you, Jesus, or thank you, God, or thank you, universe, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm not really like into, as you can probably imagine, like labels and like limited thinking and putting myself in a box and having to pressure myself or force myself to think a certain way. Like I want to be open-minded and just go with like what feels right and feels good to me. And, my truth has changed a lot over the years. I was a Christian for a very, very long time. I was a Christian for over 30 years, like a devout Christian. And I've realized like, there's some things that make me feel uncomfortable. And to get back in touch with that has been really like a beautiful thing for me, So with myself and discovering things about myself. And a part of that is like exploring and like look, like reading literature that's outside of the Christian realm, and learn, like being open to learning and being open to being curious and discovering and exploring. And I kind of have realized, for me, I feel like that's what life is about. And that's what they try to take away from me. That's what they try to rob me from, is like they try to put me in this tiny, tiny, tiny box, and like everything else is demonized. Everything else is bad. Like, yoga was bad. Like yoga was terrible, like all these different things. And, when I left the group and I just felt like I had no identity left whatsoever, someone mentioned like like I'm a Scorpio, and someone mentioned like something about Scorpios, and it really brought me like some level of healing to know like, oh my gosh, that kind of describes me, and that means that I'm not just like a total sinner and a big huge mistake and a big huge bad thing. Like, this is a part of who I am, and this always was. This always was going to be a part of who I am because I'm a Scorpio. So, like, it makes sense that I would be like this, that I would be curious, that I would want to explore, that I would like mystery, that I would be so passionate. None of those things are bad or wrong. Like, that's just who I am. And, nobody is like just bad and wrong for just like naturally being, you know, who they are. So like I'm definitely not, long story short, I'm just like a little bit more open-minded than I was before.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten older and gotten out of like, because I was raised Catholic, and I find the best way to almost honor, God or like the divine spirit, whatever you want to call it, is just to be a good person and just to kind of experience what life has, like explore
Yes.
who you are, get to learn good literature, like read good literature, go see good art, explore the world as being a good person. So I think that's the
Like
best
find
way to
out
almost
what,
honor God, is just to like
yeah.
explore his creation.
Like exactly, like explore life. Like that's why we're here. I mean, that's like how I feel. This is my personal opinion. That's why we're here, is to like explore life, to be curious, and to just, do what our heart, whatever we desire, whatever is like, oh, that's like, that feels good to me, like to just like take a cooking class or to do this or that, like, to be true to ourselves. Like that is, what quote unquote God wants for us. Like that's what I was always taught, is like God only wants one thing for you, and it's what I say God wants for you. But I think it's more like there really isn't like you have free will, and you can kind of create your own life, and like they're clapping up there in heaven, they're like, yay, good job, like we're always rooting for you, like we always are happy for you. That's kind of how I look at it now.
Yeah.
Like as long as you're really being true to yourself, and that's and enjoying life, like that's like they're like like the angels are clapping and happy for you, rooting for you, and they're like that's kind of how I see it now.
And I can't think of a better note to end this on, because we had a lot of bright spots here, but we hit some dark areas. And I was just happy to have you on, be able to share your story more. And we'll have to have you on again, because this was a podcast that more people need to hear.
Thank you very much for having me on. And also thank you for everything you said. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate this conversation.
No problem. We'll have you on again. And thank you for